and 8 more for a shot at the title. Yet he loved his profession as a man loves a certain kind of woman, following her from one tank town to the next, beating pugs with names like Piano Mover Jones, Sammy Slaughter, and Big Boy Hogue. But once he hit the big time, he stayed long past a fighter's usual span, a bebop version of Methuselah, spinning his legend with sports writers and knocking out opponents with impressive regularity. Here are the wonderfully rich life and times of boxing's most ardent ambassador, Sir Archie Moore.
He was traveling from one southern state to another for a fight. He had knocked on a door. There was a young Caucasian lady there, and she said that he could sleep in a barn. He heard some voices, and he happened to look out. It was a lynch mob on the way, a few guys on the way to get him.
When he fought in Florida, he saw signs which said, "No Jews, dogs, or N's allowed." Niggers, allowed.
Archie Moore was the #1 contender for years of the light heavyweights. And one of the great stories I remember, an old guy told me that he remembers seeing him on a road with a stick over his shoulder, hitchhiking.
He did it all. You know, sandwiches with no meat, living out of the back of flop houses, hotels that wouldn't service black fighters.
Archie Moore emerged in the 30s at a time when there were many black fighters who didn't get a chance.
This whole story is representative of the great black fighters who were unable to get their opportunity.
There was a fear in the white establishment that, quote, blacks would take over the sport.
You're either an opponent expected to get licked or sometimes taking a dive, or you had such great talent and had such great connections that someone like Joe Louis could emerge.
The boxing establishment, once every 10 years, they would let through a great black fighter. Henry Armstrong, then Ray Robinson, and they made Archie Moore wait for 10 years.
As a black fighter, you had to be prepared to take the short end of the purse. You had to be prepared to travel, and you had to be prepared to be matched tough.
Montreal, December 10th, 1958. On the edge of middle age, Archie Moore took on rugged light heavyweight Yvon Durrell, who at 29 was in the prime of his career.
It was cold inside the arena, and Archie got a slow start in the fight, and Durrell caught him right away.
Durrell comes storming in at Archie Moore early in the fight. Get him, and he just did with a right hand to the jaw. 5, 6, 7, 8. Up that 9, but staggering.
And Archie shouldn't have got up, but his courage got him up.
Archie Moore dazed and staggering. Yvon Durrell swarming over him. Is this tonight Father Time swings the side? Archie Moore pounding from rope to rope.
He was knocked down 3 times in the first round. He was caught cold.
Staggering about the ring. Up in the count of 2, there is no mandatory 8 count. There is no automatic 3 knockdown. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He's up at the count of 9. If Archie Moore lasts this round, it will be boxing's modern miracle. 30 seconds to go.
I remember feeling sorry for him every time. I said, look at this old guy, he's going to get hurt. Why don't you retire? But he wouldn't give up. He had a heart like a lion.
There's the bell. Archie Moore has made it. His handlers flew across the ring to get him back to that corner, and this is a big minute in Archie Moore's life.
I don't think anybody thought Archie Moore was going to survive the fight.
Once the Archie Moore fight with Durrell took place, everybody understood now a fight is not over until it's over.
Archie Moore staggering but fighting back. Amazing display by boxing's elder statesman Archie Moore. How long can it go out?
And in front of your eyes, you see the old guy getting younger and the young guy getting older.
Archie knew that sooner or later you're gonna make that mistake, and I'll be there looking at you.
10 seconds left. Down goes Durrell. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Saved by the bell at the count of 8.
Archie roared back, figured out Durrell, and finally knocked him out in the 11th round.
Durrell seems to be on his way, blood streaming from his nose and cut over his right eye. Moore back at moving again. Down he goes again with a coming right hand. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Struggling at 9, 10. He is out.
To get off the floor the way Archie did, then knock out Durrell, it was something to behold.
Archie, I think at 90 years old, you might still be the light heavyweight champion of the world, too. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Archie Moore, the light heavyweight champion of the world.
After a fight, Moore always said, did the fans enjoy the fight? Did they like my performance? And this was his greatest performance.
As old as he was, you still saw what made him great, which was what was inside him.
That comeback win against Durrell summed up the previous 25 years of his career.
It had been less a career than an odyssey across the shadowed face of boxing. From it, Moore emerged a man of curious complexity, a thinker and a writer.
He loved to write letters. He would write up to 30 or 40 a day. That was his entertainment, staying up late at night just writing whoever he felt like writing.
He wrote a lot of notes to write. I used to get notes from Archie all the time, and he couldn't spell very well at all, but what he said made a lot of sense. There was a certain amount of wisdom to everything he said. They were filled with philosophy about the black man and where he had come from and how he had gotten into prize fighting and what it all meant in the infinite scheme of things.
Muhammad Ali learned an awful lot from him in terms of producing a verse or producing a prediction or promoting a fight.
He was full of all kinds of stories about his own career, his diet, his background, you name it.
When he trained in Adams, Massachusetts for the Marciano fight, he told the press from New York that he'd fought there some years before, struggling to make a living. He had to sleep in his car. Unfortunately, the local reporter had covered him on that fight and informed the press that actually Archie had slept in the hotel.
If Moore embellished certain episodes of his past, there is clear objective testimony about his accomplishments in the ring.
Depending on whose record book you looked at, 228 fights or more, which makes a complete mockery of the records of today's fighters.
To this day, he has the record of the most knockouts of any professional fighter. 141 knockouts, unheard of. To even have 141 fights and one knockout 141 people.
I said, what enabled you to be able to be successful when you were at an age when most men had retired? He said, I just made up my mind that I was going to outlast everybody.
I think he knew how great he was, and he kept being denied the equal opportunity to prove it. If Archie Moore was white, he would have been a champion 10 years earlier.
Well, there was always a mystery when Archie was born, and he liked to prolong that mystery. His mother claimed he was born in Benoit, Mississippi in 1913. Archie claimed he was born in Collinsville, Illinois in 1916.
A federal census showed that he was 2 years old in 1918, and that he was born as Archie Lee Wright.
Other evidence indicates Moore was born in 1913. Whatever time or place he arrived, it wasn't in the best of circumstances.
His father was kind of a mover and a shaker, didn't let the grass grow too much under his feet.
My grandmother had him at the age of 13, and my auntie, Willie Pearl Moore, and her husband, Cleveland Moore, adopted him.
She was a nice little lady and very religious, and she thought the world of Archie just like her own son.
His Aunt Willie Pearl taught Archie how to be very neat and how to clean, and as Archie put it, they were too poor to paint and too proud to whitewash, but they kept everything spotless.
The woman gave him all of the philosophical approaches to life that he used later on. When a task is once begun, never leave it until it's done. If the labor is great or small, do it well or not at all.
When Archie was still a boy, his neatly defined world was shaken to its foundation.
His uncle Cleveland passed away during a hazing accident at work, and Archie started getting into mischief. He was with some friends, and they took money from a cable car. His friends decoyed the conductor. Archie took the change and ran, and happened to bump into an on-duty police officer.
You know, I don't even know if it was $5. He went to a reform school for that.
At first, he got picked on a couple times, but he had learned to box. He had taken some boxing lessons previous to that, and he knocked a big guy out. He broke his hand in the process, but he never got bothered after that.
During his 22 months at Missouri's Boonville Reformatory, the teenager started what became a lifelong custom, writing letters. In one to his Aunt Willie, he announced he would become a boxer. 3 years later, Moore owned a 27 3-1 record and little else.
He started in such a modest way because he was busted like an awful lot of people were in the early 30s.
Archie looked back in history for his models. One of his was Jack Johnson.
Then one day he came down to the junior high school I was going to. He singled me out of the class of boys that were boxing. And he said, you'll make it. So you'll make it.
But what Jack Johnson neglected to tell Archie that day was just how long making it would take and how much it would cost.
The vast, vast majority of patrons at arenas were white. I'd say safely 90% of the managers were white.
They wouldn't give him any matches or anything like that. So he began to hitch rides on the freight trains.
In the 1930s, it wasn't unusual for black people to be moving around this country trying to find some form of employment. Jumping on a train and being hobos and hitchhiking wasn't unusual at all.
It almost cost him his life one time. When the conductor caught him hopping a train, he took his club and tried to hit Archie with it, and the club shattered everywhere.
And somehow Archie Moore did not become bitter, did not give up. He had this vagabond career where he would go to Australia.
He would go anywhere from Tijuana to Canada to fight anybody around the world. He was a showman. He was a P.T. Barnum.
Archie beat all the tough guys. He started to make a real name for himself. But he wasn't making very big paydays.
Very often, they'd fight for main event for $500, $700. Big score in those days was $1,000.
In 1940, 7 straight victories in Australia brought more recognition in the U.S. Then, in a wink, more than his career was at stake when an ulcer, followed by pneumonia, landed him in San Diego Community Hospital.
After he had the surgery, when they brought him home, he weighed less than 100 pounds. The doctor told him, "So Archie, you can kiss it goodbye. You'll never fight again, no matter what." There's a scar that goes from the top of his stomach down to under the belt there. And Mr. Felix Thurman, who was his trainer at the time, took a mallet and beat out a license plate and put it over his stomach so he could spar.
He'd take like a 5-pound flat iron and he'd stand in front of the mirror and just work his arms, punching. He could walk on his hands around the block, up and down stairs.
Moore resumed his boxing career shortly after America's entry into World War II. By December of 1944, he had extended his record to 71, 12, and 3 against the best of the West. Knowing that the big names fought in New York, Moore headed east.
He had to go and create sites where he could exist, where he could thrive, where he could survive.
He had a very busy career fighting other great black fighters who no one else wanted to fight.
Jack Chase and Eddie Booker and Holman Williams. It was just an array of, and they had to fight each other to stay busy. And they fought 7, 8, 9 times apiece.
Archie came at a time when it was very difficult for black fighters to make it unless they had a connection.
Translation, Moore would not get on the card at Madison Square Garden without establishing a tie to the criminal organization that controlled all boxing in New York.
The mob controlled a lot of fighters, a lot of weight divisions, and Archie Moore had too much purity as an artist, too much pride, too much dignity to do business with the mob.
I might have gone with them had they offered me some fights. All I wanted was fights. I didn't give a damn who I fought.
But there was his boxing technique. Masterful, intelligent, but not flashy enough for the average fight fan.
He had a difficult style. It was not particularly appealing. He was
a counter mover, counter puncher.
He wasn't the kind of guy that went out there, try to take a guy out quick. Even if he knew he was better, he would feel him out, look for his weak points.
He became really the old mongoose. He would lay in wait.
Well, the mongoose was just so clever. So I'll be the mongoose. I won't be afraid.
Archie would fight out of what I called a log cabin defense. He'd put his arms up like this and he'd peek through it.
He used to always say, for every action, there's a reaction. So if you show a guy one move, you got to know what his response is going to be in order to catch him.
There was nothing fancy about him. He could box, he could punch. He knew what boxing was all about.
If you're moving your boy, you wouldn't want to come against Archie Moore, who was a very accomplished fighter.
You mentioned Archie Moore, the guy said, who needs him? Give me somebody else. Why take a tough fight like that?
Archie hooked up with Charlie Johnson, who was a successful fight manager in New York. And Charlie got him the fights he needed.
On his new manager's advice, Moore once again hit the road to get some fights, this time to Argentina in 1951, where he won over the press, the fight fans, and fascist dictator Juan Perón.
Buenos Aires fight fans give light heavyweight champion Archie Moore an uproarious reception that is echoed by a cordial greeting by Argentine President Juan Perón. From the start, Moore is just too much for his foe.
He took a little heat for admitting to being a good friend of Juan Perón, but he said he got treated better by Perón in Argentina than he did by several people back here.
Perón was himself a fancier of boxing. He was a former boxer.
Perón had told him, Archie, we want you to stay over in South America. And if you stay, we will give you all the land that you can see.
Archie said, I like this place a lot, but my home's the States.
Moore had good reason to go home. Awaiting him in New York was the offer of a shot at light heavyweight champ Joey Maxim. But to close the deal, Charlie Johnston had to give Maxim's manager, Doc Kearns, part ownership of Moore.
He had to take Maxim's con man manager, Jack Kearns, in as his co-manager and give Kearns 10% of all of his earnings in the future.
Doc always said I'd rather make a buck by larceny than $10 doing some honest work.
He was always pulling deals. He was always trying to one-up, always looking for his next million.
The biggest money-paying crowd in the history of boxing in St. Louis, Missouri, has turned out here tonight for the light heavyweight championship of the world.
St. Louis, December 17th, 1952. Archie Moore himself could not have scripted it better. After more than 3 decades without any contact, Moore traced his father through a private detective. And on the biggest night of Archie's boxing career, Thomas Wright sat at ringside. Next to him was Archie's mother, Lorena.
This is his 129th professional engagement, and this is the first one in which he's ever been up there for a championship chance.
He had been a contender for many years, not just in the light heavyweight division, but in the middleweight division as well. So he was ready.
He was a Mack truck with no brakes. He was on a mission. That was his target, and he had been waiting for 15 years.
He threw a jab, Archie take the jab away from him. He threw a right hand, Archie step on the outside of it.
Archie Moore had reach, and he pressed the fight, and Maxim just couldn't, had nothing to slow him down with.
The right hand has Maxim in trouble. It landed high on the left temple of Maxim. Moore's boxing skills certainly showing here in the late rounds.
But Archie Moore was too smart and too quick and too good a boxer, even for a boxer like Joey Maxim. He probably won 11 rounds to 4.
Well, they won 15 rounds. Archie just humiliated him.
Winner by unanimous decision, and the new light heavyweight champion of the world, Archie Moore.
His trainer was so excited that he had become a champion, tried to lift him up in the ring the minute the decision was announced.
And he said, stop, leave me alone. Don't make a big deal out of this. I should have won this thing 12 years ago. Just be cool, be professional, and raise my hand.
Archie has finally come into his own as he wins the unanimous decision in the 129th bout of his career, and it's his 105th win.
Archie wanted that championship so badly he would have fought for nothing, and he virtually did.
To give Joey Maxim $100,000 to fight Archie Moore, which at that time was big money. Archie only got $800, And out of $800, after he paid everybody off, he wound up with $57.
Understand that. Which was more important to him at that time, the light heavyweight title or the money? He knew that the title was more important.
Once he got it, he kept it. he says, Doc, as hard as it was to get it, I'm going to keep it. I ain't giving it up to nobody.
In August of 1954, with Doc Kearns and the New York sports press in his corner, Moore finally reached boxing's mecca, Madison Square Garden.
Introducing the challenger, Harold Johnson. His opponent, light heavyweight champion of the world, Archie Moore.
And here's a fighter who was ranked #1 for years, but for 19 years, he never stepped foot into Madison Square Garden.
Moore was up at the count of 5 as the bell rang.
Harold Johnson dropped Archie in the 10th round, and Archie came back and knocked out Harold Johnson with a combination in the 14th round.
And that's Johnson in trouble. Johnson is down, and Ruby Goldstein stops it. Ruby Goldstein stops it. The winner and still light heavyweight champion is Archie Moore.
The dramatic manner in which Moore defended his title seduced Joan Hardy, a young New York model he had been pursuing.
After he won, she walks right up to him and she said, "I'll marry you now."
He was no one's angel. You can't have married 5 times and not experimented some. Women are drawn to people who achieve, and he was an achiever.
He had a fondness for the ladies, but most fighters did in those days, and most athletes did then.
He got married 4 times quick when he was young, and then his final marriage, which he considers his only marriage, was to Joan, and that one lasted till his death.
With his home life in order for perhaps the first time, Moore set about solidifying his championship. Just one barrier remained, a heavyweight's appetite.
He'd be lying in bed, suffering. He'd be thinking of ice cream sundaes and chocolate cake, Boston cream pie, banana splits.
They weighed him one night and he was great weight, and the next day he was big as a house.
Moore fighting at what must now be a very unnatural weight of 174.5 pounds. He was 206 only a couple of weeks ago.
I was doing an interview with him at his hotel room, and Doc Kearns, who was then his manager, walked in, and Archie said, "Can we order room service?" And Doc said to him, "Coffee only." Doc then left the room, and when he left, Archie reached behind the couch and took out a box of donuts that he had bought while he was running that morning.
Moore claimed he could best shed pounds with a rather bizarre diet he discovered down under.
Legend has it Archie was out for a run and he saw a very thin Australian Aborigine, and he said, "How do you stay so thin?" And the Aborigine said, "I will exchange my secret for your red turtleneck sweater, and I'll even throw in a boomerang."
He used to say that the great thing to do is never to swallow anything, and he would eat and chew and chew and chew, and then he would take what was left and he'd put it on a little plate next to the big plate.
Archie loved to propagate this type of activity. He loved the excitement of people talking about his age, and especially his diet.
In 1955, after 4 impressive title defenses, including 2 over Joey Maxim, Moore decided to pick a fight with heavyweight champ Rocky Marciano.
Rocky Marciano was refereeing an amateur fight in Baltimore. They put Archie on a plane. From ringside, he kept, "Rocky, fight me, fight me."
Basically, it was a way of yelling chicken to give this old man a fight.
He put out wanted posters with Marciano's picture on it, saying, "Wanted by Archie Moore, #1 contender."
Archie realized that the only way that he could get a fight, because he was so good, was if he could somehow get the press on his side. And so he was his own public relations guy.
Do you feel, Archie, that you can knock Marciano out? Of course, he never has been. Well, that's always the first time.
Convinced he could stop the 48-0 champ, Moore would get his chance.
Happy to announce that today Rocky Marciano, the heavyweight champion of the world, has agreed to defend his title against Archie Moore in the Yankee Stadium on Tuesday, September 20th.
It was a ballpark fight and did very well. Archie proved himself to be exactly what black fighters were not supposed to be prior to World War II. A tremendous draw.
Ladies and gentlemen, main event, 15 rounds for the heavyweight championship of the world.
Watch that sneaky right.
In the second round, Moore delivered what came to be known in boxing as the perfect punch. It was an inside right that came between the hands of Marciano to the point of the chin.
Archie, for the rest of his life, was of the opinion that the referee had aided Rocky.
Rocky's up at the count of 2, a little dazed, but not hurt.
Archie claimed that Kessler was stalling, taking too much time, dusting the gloves, giving recuperative opportunity to Rocky.
I think Archie, in his own mind, took a split second and magnified it. But to a fighter, a split second in the course of a fight can be a long time.
Whatever the reason, Moore was unable to seize the moment, and his window of opportunity closed. As the early rounds passed, Moore fought with more courage than speed as he absorbed the champion's signature brand of punishment.
I was outboxing him easily, and he came around with some awful bone-cutting jolts.
Archie was very heroic in that fight because the doctor wanted to stop it, and Archie said, "Just let me go with one more desperado."
He insisted on going on and being counted out when he no longer was in the fight.
He just said, no, I'm a champion too. You know, take me out on my shield.
Winner by a knockout, Rocky Marciano.
Later, at Cafe Bohemia in Greenwich Village, Moore strummed and thumped the bass fiddle deep into the night.
It was his escape, and it was his salvation, and it was his joy all at one time. It seemed like he would feel the music.
Oh, he loved Billie Holiday. And he tell me, he said, Eddie, listen to the words, listen to the soul. That's what he said, the soul. She's talking, that's what he said.
He liked to work out to the tune of saxophones. There were many, many musicians that he had follow him just to play while he worked out.
During the 70s, of course, I was a young guy just playing loud music. These were the days of the big speakers. And he said, cut it down, George. I said, why? He said, listen to all the different sounds. Cut the music down.
He particularly liked to tap his feet, just quietly kind of jiggle. And I could almost see him dancing. It was as if he was on the floor dancing with someone.
If jazz soothed Archie's soul, nothing killed his hunger to be heavyweight champ. On November 30th, 1956, in Chicago, the aging warhorse met Floyd Patterson, who at 21 was young enough to be his son.
Archie, would you mind giving us a prediction on the outcome of this fight? Well, I've been a man to make many predictions, but this time you put me on the spot. I can only predict a sellout, a $500,000 gate, $200,000 television, 40%, pretty good.
I don't think Archie was in the kind of shape to stand up to a fighter like that.
There were rumors that because of various factors, including money, Archie went into the tank and permitted himself to be knocked out.
A wicked left hook sends Moore sprawling to the canvas. Moore is very hurt.
I never had any word of Archie going in the tank at all at any time. I think he came into some fights out of condition because his weight rolled up and down.
He gave it an effort. Archie Moore would never take a side seat for anybody. He had too much pride for that.
Patterson moves in and sends Moore down for the second time.
A lot of people thought Archie was going to win, and Patterson just had too much for him that night. But Archie always wanted a rematch. He petitioned hard for a rematch, but never got it.
As Moore kept his heavyweight hopes alive, he defended his own crown 9 times in 8 years.
There's the champion of the world in there. Best light heavyweight in the business.
Since many of his fights were televised, Moore's fame grew well beyond the ring. After beating Durrell in 1958, Hollywood offered him the role of Jim, the runaway slave in the movie The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn.
Hello, Jim.
Glory be. You's a ghost.
I ain't a ghost, Jim.
But you's dead. Your pap come running into town yelling that Robinson killed you.
Well, I tricked it up so Papa think I was dead, but I ain't. Here, touch me. Go ahead, touch me.
With the movie's release in 1960, Moore was criticized in some quarters of the African-American community.
There were several black organizations that did not approve of it. There weren't very many parts that blacks were allowed to play, you know, other than maids and butlers and that kind of thing.
I thought Archie had a lot of prospects as an actor, but I don't think that he ever had the follow-through to do anything for too long.
In 1962, Moore fought a young, brash heavyweight named Cassius Clay. The meeting in Los Angeles was a reunion. Moore had been Clay's taskmaster at his training camp in San Diego.
He hated it because Archie would make Cassius Clay wash dishes and clean up and things of that nature.
Archie Moore made the mistake of asking the kid to sweep the kitchen. So he said, I didn't sweep the kitchen for my mother. What am I going to sweep the kitchen for?
Cassius Clay told him, I'm not here to learn how to clean kitchens. I'm here to learn how to box. Archie said, well, we'll see about that.
Moore was eager to give his former student a lesson in boxing and manners.
Archie wanted to fight. He wanted to fight because the boy was popping off so much.
Why don't somebody just give that old guy a pension, or why don't somebody retire him? He's too old. He's old enough to be my granddaddy.
Archie Moore had a punch he called the lip buttoner. And that was going to be a right to the lip, and he was going to take care of the lipper.
That old man wouldn't go but 4 rounds with me.
Archie didn't have it anymore. Archie couldn't keep up. I mean, in fact, you couldn't see the punches. Muhammad was bip, bip, jab, move over, bang with the right hand. And he got him out of there gracefully.
It wasn't so much in that fight that Archie was knocked out. He seemed to just collapse.
Cassius raises his hands over his head, and it's all over. Clay wins by a 4th round knockout, as predicted.
Archie was way over the hill by then. The only reason he took it was for money.
For his meeting with Clay, Moore collected $75,000. 4 months later, the old mongoose fought for the last time. He retired with a record of 194 wins, 26 losses, and 8 draws.
It's a fact. Yelling out, Mr. Moore, Mr. Moore, Mr. Mongoose. He spins around real quick and he says, Archie Moore is who I am. The old mongoose is what I am. Now, can I help you?
He could be invited to someone's home for dinner. Most of us, if you sit down and they present you with something you don't like, you just won't eat it. But he would make an issue of it.
Archie had a philosophy on just about everything, on training, on diet, on fighting.
He was forever dictating to people as to what they should do. He was truly Instructor Moore. He was always teaching.
He loved asking people questions about themselves. He had something that you almost never find among today's professional athletes, intellectual curiosity.
When he was traveling, he'd spend a lot of time in the local libraries. He'd go down and just start picking up books that interested him and read.
In 1965, Moore launched a social program called Any Boy Can.
He believed that any boy that you meet had the possibilities and to become great champion or great whatever. He believed that. And he would instill that when he speak to kids, tell them how important they were.
Boys are boys. They have this uninhibited energy that they must burn up. So if we can find the places they can burn it up in something respectful, something that's going to be dignified and not bring abuse for their countries or nations or themselves, then this is what I want to do.
He wasn't someone who set up a foundation and wrote out checks. He was somebody that if food needed to be delivered, he delivered it.
He went into the housing projects and eventually he inhabited one of them himself, living among the people in one of the toughest housing projects in Los Angeles.
A lot of us didn't have fathers. Mothers were always there, and, you know, he sort of gave you a little bit of discipline in your life.
He was very militaristic in his approach and from the old school, and he had a saying that was firm but fair.
If you wash dishes, I'll show you how to do a certain move. If you rake the yard, I'll show you how to do another different move.
He had a proposal, every proposal known to man, about his ABC program.
He stopped getting government aid for it, and then he paid for it himself. So basically it came down to food on the Moore's table or money for the ABC program.
Undaunted, Moore took on a high-profile student in the early 70s, heavyweight contender George Foreman.
A lot of fighters figure, hey, I don't want to show you my old tricks like a magician, you know. He was very charitable in that way.
And here's Archie Moore, former light heavyweight champion of the world.
Hi, I'm a tactician of glove warfare, consultant, you might say, to George Foreman.
He was a teacher of basic boxing. Quick left jab, your defense, your hands go out and come right back into proper position.
George obviously copied some of the techniques of Archie with the turtle defense, crossing the arms like this.
He came down and he told me he believed that I could beat Joe Frazier, which a lot of people didn't believe as much. And he would treat me like the heavyweight champion of the world. Archie would insist, when you see Joe Frazier, I want you to tell him to shut up. And one day, Frazier was all wild and going mad and talking smart to me. And I told him, shut up, just like Archie said. And Joe was shocked. From that point on, it seemed there was a different Joe Frazier because of that.
I think Joe is hurt. Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! And Foreman is as poised as can be. It is over. It is over in the second round.
Archie Moore had predicted the fourth round, and I do everything he said do, so I credit that to Joe Lewis and Mr. Archie Moore.
3 years after helping Foreman defeat Frazier in their first fight, Moore accepted an offer to coach Nigeria's national boxing team.
He had a chance to travel, to meet dignitaries, to meet ordinary people. And I don't think it was just a handshake here and a handshake there and a couple of souvenirs from every country he visited. I think that he took part of it with him.
In September, I will be back, and I will recruit some more, okay? I remember you, okay?
The real dimension of the man was that in spite of the fact he didn't get what he thought he was entitled to, in spite of his stature with heads of state, he would put a punching bag on the back of a pickup truck. There was nothing beneath him.
He was thinking about a blind girl that he had heard about who, if she received an operation, she could see. And so he went from door to door, gathering funds to give her an operation, and she began to have her sight back.
When we return, Archie Moore fights to hang on to his memories and dreams.
As you were born in St. Louis, you once said you were born in Collinsville, Illinois. Your mother says you were born in Benoit, Mississippi. Where were you born?
I was born in South America.
As Archie Moore entered his 70s, he began to stay at home in San Diego. If time had slowed him, the old mongoose could still move when necessary.
One day he came to the gym. He was getting frustrated. He was trying to teach a kid something. He couldn't articulate the language as well as he used to because he was getting old and he was sick and everything. And he said, God darn it, threw down the cane, started shuffling, started thumping, started moving around the ring. And me and my assistant coach, we look at each other and this guy's floating around the ring and doing a good job.
I remember sitting with him when Ali was fighting Ken Norton in San Diego, and Archie came in with his beautiful wife and his gorgeous daughters. And Ali looked at the daughters, and Archie said, don't even think it.
He's playing pool and this jazz music playing in the background, and he's humming, and I knew I didn't have a chance, so I cheated. What a gentleman. He pretended not to know. He had like a little glimmer of, I know what you're up to, but it's okay.
I went out to San Diego. I've always remembered his house out there. It had a big picture window that looked out on the big route that runs out of San Diego. And we were looking out this big picture window, and he said, you know, the great thing about this view is always changing.
So was Archie. A remarkably adaptable man, Moore eagerly met every new challenge. Even as the shadow of old age gathered, he could still respond with a clear-eyed mix of philosophy and pragmatism.
I was visiting him in the hospice, and the Padres, our home team, were playing in the World Series. And I got up to leave, and I said, Archie, I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll watch the Padres. Well, that sounds like fun, sugar. If I'm here, sure. You know, some days I'm here, some days I'm just not.
There was one particular time, and he had one hand over his forehead and one over his chest. He was sort of like this. And I said, he's just in a protective position. He was actually living fights in his head.
He knew things weren't how they used to be. There was an instance in the hospital when he was tied to his bed. He woke up and broke the restraints, and he did sock a nurse. The amazing thing to me was this was an 84-year-old man that the restraints couldn't hold.
After more than 8 decades, Moore finally let go in December of 1998.
Archie was a paradox. He was calm and yet quick to anger, tender yet merciless and merciful.
He was really a scoundrel, but he was a lovable scoundrel. After a while, he was so obvious. You knew what he was doing to you, and you just allowed it to happen for the joy of his company.
I asked him one time, do you really love boxing? And he looked at me and he said, well, sugar, it was my way out, and it was my way in. You know what I mean?
No one really knew what accounted for Moore's longevity. He fought in much the same way that he lived, methodically, patiently, doggedly. He survived most of his contemporaries in the ring and out of it. When considering his own mortality, Moore said, when I'm finished, I want people to say only one thing of me. I want them to say, there goes a man. For ESPN Classic Sports Century, I'm Chris Fowler.